Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, as we speak, there is exactly 1 week to go until fall camp opens. Big Ten Media Days, just got home from that last night. I mean, it is starting to get real. The season is almost here.
It is getting very real, and these next 7 days are going to go pretty quickly, and then we'll be back at the WAC, talking to whoever they put in front of us. We'll be happy to be there. Maybe even, Tom, I don't want to jinx anything, but maybe they're going to show us one practice. Wouldn't it be the very first practice where there's no helmets, no pads, nothing like that? It's just a bunch of dudes jogging around, maybe throwing a football or two. We're going to see one practice. This is going to be it.
I have a feeling this is the year we get to see all the scrimmages. I think that's going to happen. I mean, if I was in charge, Tony, I would let you watch all the scrimmages, but unfortunately, I'm not. But hopefully, the powers that be see it the same way I do.
Well, interestingly, I would not let you into any scrimmages, but that's just
tough,
me.
But fair.
Yes. That is just my personal feelings towards you and having you have access while I am trying to win a national championship. Because you're not doing me any good on the sidelines, Tom, when I'm trying to win. But so, yeah, let's talk about what went down at Big Ten Media Days, mostly with Ryan Day, in terms of providing updates on the football team. And the one thing that you always try to take out of this is injury news. What's the latest on everybody? Who is healthy? And for me, the most interesting thing is that Lathan Ransom is going to be participating in fall camp. He had a horrendous broken leg, if I recall correctly, and last season, and we weren't sure what his prognosis was. I think I kind of even wrote him off this year, and so he will be ramping up slowly, but he will be fully participating by the end of camp. The only guy who won't be participating in camp is Mitchell Melton, which isn't a surprise after tearing his ACL in the spring game, so he's likely out for the season. We'll see what happens with him. I mean, there's probably no harm in him trying to come back, considering he's already, redshirted and all of this stuff. And he's eventually got to play. But having Lathan Ransom back, it clogs up or provides depth. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. There's more depth in a position where we're still not exactly sure what everybody is going to be looking like in the two deep. Now we know Ronnie Hickman at free safety, Josh Proctor at strong safety, Court Williams at strong safety. Ryan Day said that they're looking at Lathan Ransom at two spots, moving him back and forth between, and he said two spots, not nickel, meaning looking at him basically at free safety and strong safety. And I do have some concerns about the free safety position overall at Ohio State because it's manned by guys who weren't really looked at that position previously. Now, having split safety defense helps in terms of, you don't need that center fielder back there. But Ronnie Hickman, this will be his first year playing it. They've never really looked at Lathan Ransom there in the past, but that was in a single high defense. So maybe I think he's definitely more suited to a two high defense, especially as a free safety. He's played he played the other spots in the previous secondary. Court Williams, we know, is probably just a strong safety, even though they can move him to free safety if they need to, but he won't be playing nickel. I'm just wondering if this is just a team of a defense of a bunch of strong safeties, and if at some point does that hurt them, or can they get away with it with their defense being a split safety thing? And you don't need, like I said, you don't need that that center fielder, but I do have concerns here.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of just the uncertainty of everything. It's a new scheme, new coaches, they're asking the safeties to do new things, and guys are doing it in new positions. So there's a lot that, if the Notre Dame game goes well, that may assuage pretty much all of those concerns. But, I got a chance to talk to Ronnie Hickman. He was one of the guys who was at Big Ten Media Days, and I just sort of asked him, what has that transition been like for you, moving from he was kind of the boundary safety last year, and now he's on the field side. And he said, honestly, the biggest difference is, well, there's just a lot more ground to cover. And, he is not necessarily, when we heard about guys, playing that sort of center field role, it was always like Proctor. Proctor could go, numbers to numbers, or, that was not necessarily what Ronnie Hickman's role was. So it's a little interesting to me that they moved him over there. But, I think also you have to remember they're asking, not only is it kind of a 2 high look instead of 1 high, they're asking these guys to do kind of a little bit of a different thing. So the boundary spot is not doing exactly the same stuff that the boundary spot was last year, and the field spot is not really doing what the field spot was doing last year. So, everyone sort of taking one step to the left is like, well, I mean, that maybe that's not quite as crazy as it sounds, because you're looking for different things in those spots. So maybe it makes sense that they've got guys moving around. Ransom is interesting to me because, he feels like he was a contributor on the national championship team in 2020. He played a bunch of snaps in that national championship game against Alabama. He's someone they obviously like a lot, but he broke his leg. He broke his leg on the kickoff return for a touchdown that Britton Covey had in the Rose Bowl. That was the play he got hurt on. So, he had, I think, a similar injury to Josh Proctor. I don't know if it was exactly the same injury, but it was a similar, bad broken lower leg injury, essentially. And Josh Proctor broke his leg in the middle of September. That's 3.5 months earlier, essentially, than Lathan Ransom broke his leg. And Josh Proctor was back for the spring game, and he wasn't back for, everything. He didn't play in the tackling portion of the game, but he was okay enough that they were kind of, okay with him playing a little bit before, when they were doing the thud tempo before they went to tackling. So, assuming it was kind of the same injury and it was kind of the same healing timeline, then Ransom should be kind of ready to go now. But he has not yet done anything on a practice field with Jim Knowles as the coach. So obviously he's been in the film study, he's been in the meetings, all that kind of stuff. So potentially mentally he's up to speed. I'll be interested to see how long it takes on the field for them to for him to feel comfortable and them to feel comfortable with him in whatever spot he's in. The fact that they're looking at him in 2 different spots makes me think, maybe he's not going to be an immediate contributor this year, just as, they're sort of figuring out what they have with him and then where he fits best.
Yeah, and this spring, they really didn't have an opportunity to do that with Josh Proctor, with Lathan Ransom, even some with Court Williams being banged up. Like, it feels like Ronnie Hickman was the free safety by default because Josh Proctor couldn't do it. But then Jim Knowles really liked what he saw there. So, you assume that will continue, but I wonder what would have happened if Josh Proctor was completely healthy for spring ball. Would he now be at free safety, and would Ronnie Hickman be at strong safety? What would that look like? So I wouldn't be shocked if there's some movement throughout the season, but it sure seems like everything is set. And me speculating that there's going to be movement, just I don't have anything to base that on other than in the past they've played the other positions, and now they're playing new positions. And yeah, I'm with you on Lathan Ransom. They got to figure out what he can do. And this poor guy's never had a home in terms of, because he's done the cover safety back in the single high stuff. He's done other things and shined a bit as a freshman, was able to get out there. I'm just interested to see how long it takes him, how much time they have to allow him to, they don't need necessarily him to come in because they've got some guys now. Who is that second free safety then? Is it still Kai Stokes? Is it Jansen Dunn? That's one of the questions that maybe Lathan Ransom can answer, but he's going to have to do some catch up here in fall camp.
Yeah, and I think, everyone came away from the spring game very excited about Kai Stokes, but Kai Stokes is still a true freshman, which, you can be a pretty good safety, and as a freshman, make freshman mistakes, which is what freshmen do, and, have that turns into a freshman mistake at nose tackle turns into a first down. A freshman mistake at, one of the deep safety spots can turn into 70 yards very quickly. I always think back to, there have just not been that many starting true freshman safeties. And I'm trying to remember if Donnie Nicky was a true freshman or a redshirt freshman when he started in 1999. But he was someone who, was a very good 4-year starter for Ohio State, key contributor to the national championship team, played in the NFL for a long time, But man, oh man, his freshman year was not great. And his freshman year probably was not as bad as people thought back then. He was, every team that gives up a lot of points always has kind of a designated whipping boy among the fan base, and that was kind of Donnie Nicky's role. But he also, he got a lot better over the course of his 4 years, and that's because when you're starting as a freshman, you're gonna make some mistakes, and that's a place where mistakes have some serious consequences. So, I think everyone was very impressed with Kai Stokes in the spring game. Let's see what they've got out of him. Jansen Dunn got hurt last year, really didn't get to see a whole heck of a lot out of him. So there's just a lot of unproven and a lot of question marks. Even if you want to throw Lathan Ransom in there, like we talked, there are some question marks there with Lathan Ransom too. So it feels like that might be the safety spot where, behind, you don't know exactly what you got with Ronnie Hickman there. Ronnie Hickman was maybe one of the best players on the defense last year. Slightly different role. We'll see how that, what that actually turns into this year. But behind him, that feels like a pretty big question mark because, Court Williams is a little bit of a question mark at that second safety spot because he hasn't been able to stay healthy and on the field. And, Cam Martinez at the second nickel spot, I think they're very happy with what they have in Tanner McAllister. Cam Martinez just is another guy who has not played a ton. He looked good in spot duty last year. I think he had a pick six in the Tulsa game or the Maryland game, one of those. But, he's a great athlete, but you haven't seen it. And, we're talking about a lot about the second string safeties, which, there were lots of coaches and Big Ten Media Days whose, big concerns on defense were not the second string safeties. And, yeah, we can get to the linebackers too in a minute. But, I think that's another concern for Ohio State. But yeah, second string safeties, second string offensive line. Some of Ohio State's concerns are not necessarily quite on par with a lot of the other teams in the league.
Yeah, definitely first world problems, but there still are unknowns in terms of, Ronnie Hickman was defensive MVP or whatever last year, but new position, new duties, and new adjustments in a new defense. Tom, let's say if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. If you have already subscribed, thank you very much for that. If you're looking for us on YouTube, you're listening to this right now, you can just go ahead and search Buckeye Huddle on YouTube. You will find the channel there and go ahead and subscribe there. And Tom dropped a bunch of videos from Big Ten Media Days. Obviously got the morning show, Tom. The morning
Buckeyes
show.
Buckeyes tomorrow morning. Yes, Buckeyes tomorrow morning. That is the new morning show. Had, our usual group of guests. Going to have Alex Gleitman on for Friday's morning show. Had our buddy Mark Martin from the Dayton Daily News on for both of the shows from Indianapolis. Had some good conversations with him about stuff we learned about Ohio State, stuff we learned about Michigan, and other folks. If you are watching this, hit that thumbs up button. That will help bump us up the algorithm a little bit. Leave us a nice comment if you feel like leaving us a nice comment. That's also helpful. But yeah, hit that bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that, because just because you were subscribed to us 3 weeks ago doesn't mean you're subscribed to us now. So you can subscribe to the new channel there. And before we move on, I did want to touch on one more thing on the injury front. I mean, you talked about the fact that Mitchell Melton was the only guy who Ryan Day said is kind of projected to be out for the season right now. One name that he did not mention there, you may have noticed, he did not say Kam Babb's name. So Kam Babb is potentially healthy back. Boy, that has the opportunity to be a real feel-good story this year if Kam Babb can finally get on the field and stay on the field. He's had so many knee injuries and just been such a good soldier his whole career and so respected by his teammates. If he can stay on the field and be healthy, he had contributed on special teams quite a bit in the 2020 season. That was the only season he's been healthy since coming to Ohio State. Still has not had his first career catch. That will be, if he can just get his first career catch this year, that will be a great moment. If he can get a touchdown catch this year, that will be a great moment. That's, I think there's a lot for Ohio State fans to look forward to this season. It should be a pretty good team. But man, oh man, if Kam Babb can stay healthy, get on the field, and contribute in some way on that offense, that is something that I think everyone should be rooting for this fall.
Yeah, I've put together a list of 100 things to look forward to this season for Ohio State football. And I'll go ahead and release that on the Buckeye Huddle message board probably this week. But number one is Kam Babb's first catch. That will be a big deal, and I don't know that enough people will be able to recognize what it means, like in the stands or watching on TV. So yeah, we should talk about stuff like that. Number 2 on the list was his first touchdown catch. Like, again, these are things that he could have quit so many times. 4 ACL tears, and has been a leader throughout all of this, has leaned on others. Others have leaned on him when they've gone through their own injuries. And he has come through this, and had somebody ask on the message board, Buckeye Huddle message board, could Kam Babb actually start? And I don't expect that to happen, but I would not be shocked to see him start against Notre Dame. But I don't think he will get his reps won't be as many as Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison. But this is one of those things that I don't want to say it's bigger than football, but it's part of football. It's part of the story of football. It's part of the allure of football, and that it mirrors life in so many different ways. And this would be an accomplishment. It would be a nice recognition. They can also save that for senior day against Michigan, something like that. Hopefully that the season goes well for him. But yeah, that's one of those things I'm looking forward to, Tom. I know everybody is, and the sideline on that first catch is I'm assuming it's going to go pretty crazy.
You would think. I do wonder, stadium on the whole, the 100,000 people in there, how many people are really going to know the story there, and all of the backstory involved there. One thing that might change that and make that more well known is, they'll give out the Block O jersey at some point this fall. He's someone who I think is at least on the list there to potentially be that guy who gets the Block O jersey, and if he does, then that becomes a story in and of itself, and probably makes that a little more widespread, known more in a more of a widespread manner among the fan base. Jackson Smith-Njigba was asked about him at one point in Indianapolis, and just sort of asked, like, are you okay with giving up some catches if that means Kam? And it was like, couldn't say yes fast enough. Like, everyone wants this to happen for Kam Babb, because they know what he has meant to them. They know individually, they know what he's meant to the program, and everyone just kind of really just wants this to happen at this point. So hopefully everything kind of stays as is, and he's able to get on the field and contribute in some kind of way this fall on offense. That would be definitely something to root for.
A 2018 signee. I think he played most of the season in 2020, but mostly special teams. Did get some time at receiver. Never had a catch, and would just be a really, really good story, and not just a story, but a great accomplishment and an example for others to follow down the line, and inside football and outside of football. Tom, I want to move to go from a nice story to some bad-ish news going on around Ohio State in terms of defensive recruiting. Caleb Downs, 5-star safety, chooses Alabama. People, Buckeye fans, are in doldrums in the doldrums right now because of the way recruiting is going. It's not been a great month, defensively especially. And Ryan Day addressed this a little bit because he was asked about it a little bit on Wednesday. And yeah, they always want to have a top 5 class. He expects that they will have another top 5 class this year. But when you have a brand new defensive staff, everybody except for Larry Johnson, and Larry Johnson every year comes with his own positives and negatives. Obviously, he's a great recruiter, great developer, great teacher, but also the negative recruiting that other schools do against him. Well, he's not going to be there for your 4 years. He's not going to be there. So all of the new defensive coaches and Larry Johnson kind of, I don't want to say they're recruiting from behind, but the new coaches certainly are. And they can say all of the great things that they want, and it's all great to hear, and Caleb Downs loves to hear it. But this is something we talk about on the show a lot, theory versus testimony. Ohio State loves to talk about all of the testimony that they have, and it's proven. But this here, the defensive coaches are they're recruiting through theory right now. They're recruiting through, like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're planning to do. They don't have any portion of their Ohio State time being, this is what we've done, because they haven't done anything yet. And so recruits need to see that. And Ryan Day said as much Once the recruits can see the guys playing, it's going to be a much easier sell to them.
Yeah, and you look at last year's defense, and it was not very good. And you look at the year before that, and it was not very good. And 2019 was great. 2019 was a fantastic Ohio State defense, but 2018 was not very good. So that's 3 of the last 4 years the defense has been, somewhere between shaky and not good at all. And the one year they had, the one year that they had that was a good season, you had Chase Young, you had Jordan Fuller, you had Jeff Okuda, you had Jeff Hafley calling the defense. They haven't really been able to replicate that. So, you look back, this is kind of a variation on the players who, talk about the guys they watched growing up. And, you have people now talking about, watching JT Barrett growing up. And it's like, oh man, like we are about to turn to dust. Because, the guys who are playing right now, they might remember Joey Bosa and those guys, but they probably don't remember John Simon. That's probably before they were really paying attention to football. So you've got, kind of your most recent seasons are what these guys remember. They're what they know. And like everyone can shine up their stuff and talk about how great it's going to be moving forward. But if it's looked bad 3 of the previous 4 years, like, well, that's what you're selling right now. Because this is the variation of every coach going into Big Ten media days and talking about how great they feel about their team and all that. And it's like, yeah, well, everyone feels great this time of year. They haven't had to do anything yet. Well, let's see how everyone's feeling in October. Let's see how everyone's feeling in November. That's what Ohio State has to sell on the trail right now is the offensive line. Well, Justin Fry is going to sell what Justin Fry has to sell, but he doesn't have a whole lot to sell right now because they haven't had to blow anyone off the ball on 3rd and 2 yet this year. The defense virtually completely turned over. Obviously, you mentioned the Larry Johnson piece of it. And, I think it's probably fairly telling that, if you look at the spots where they have missed somewhat recently, it's all the spots where a lot of these new coaches are: secondary, linebackers, offensive line. Like, those are the spots. Everyone's feeling fine about the wide receiver recruiting. Quarterback, they don't have a quarterback for the 2023 class, and I don't know that that's a huge concern for anyone right now, because it's like, well, they've just been stacking 5 stars, and they've got another one coming in 24, so if there's 1 year where they, whatever, it's not the end of the world. It's the spots where the new guys are right now that are kind of the spots where you're sort of seeing a lot of those questions come up. So, I think one thing that maybe everyone can kind of take a deep breath is, number one, the class is still ranked in number 1, number 2 at the moment, so it's not the end of the world right now. And, there's a long way to go towards December. And, this is when they have something that they can show people and have a little bit of more evidence to, yes, okay, when we say this is going to be a great defense this year, really, we weren't kidding. Like, here, look, they just gave up 6 points to Notre Dame. That's it. Like, whatever it is. That, I think, changes the conversation a little bit here around some of these guys. And, Ohio State is, the goal is to have a top 5 recruiting class, and they've pretty much had a top 5 recruiting class every year. So until that changes, I don't, it's not great right now, but it's also not signing day right now. So there's a little more time to go before any of this really matters.
Ryan Day wants a top 10 defense every year. You can see why the defensive coaches were replaced, not just for the results on the field, but the stats that they gave up. And when you look at the recruiting that they did, and I wrote about this a little bit, and I did what I know, what I think, what I wonder at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can go there now. Everything is free for the moment as the site is developed, but the message board is live. One of the things I wrote about is, and I'm not sure, Tom, you probably didn't see this, you've been very busy in Indianapolis. From 2018 to 2020, Ohio State signed 35 defenders. None of those guys have been all Big Ten players. 4 of them have been second team all Big Ten. 3 of those guys are on the defensive line: Tyreek Smith, Tommy Togiai, and Zach Harrison. The other is Ronnie Hickman. So you mentioned the secondary coaches being gone, the linebacker coach being gone. In those 3 years, the only signee from the back 7 that has been at least a second team all Big Ten was Ronnie Hickman. This is unacceptable. And you saw, I fully believe the 2021 defensive class is going to be very, very good. We saw a lot of good things out of them immediately. Denzel Burke already a third team corner last year. So I think that is a good bounce back. But I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was probably more appalled than anything at how poor those 3 years were. And I need to go back and look at the previous 3 years and compare that to what happened in 2018 and 2020. But that's just a 3-year stretch with no all Big Ten performers. Now that can change this year. You still got Zach Harrison. You still have Ronnie Hickman, Josh Proctor. And frankly, there's a lot of guys from that 2018 class that can still move forward and become All-Americans this year, frankly. But to have nobody as an All Big Ten player in 3 straight classes, can't do it. You have to be gone.
Yeah, and you look at the recruiting on the offensive side of the ball versus the recruiting on the defensive side of the ball, and the production on the offensive side of the ball versus the production on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, there have been very clearly been 2 tiers of Ohio State football the last couple of years. They have been, they have become for better, for maybe not to quite the degree of some of the like Texas Tech teams where it's like, do you actually literally have 11 players out on the field? Because it feels like you don't. It's not quite to that degree, but there's no question that the offense has been carrying the team for the last few years, and that's partly a testament to Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson and Corey Dennis and Brian Hartline and Tony Alford and how good a job they do in terms of coaching and development and recruiting and everything. But the defensive side of the ball, well, you gotta get that straightened out. And I think you have seen the realities of the situation, kind of come to bear, where it's not a coincidence that all those new coaches are on that side of the ball, because Ryan Day probably recognized that before you did. Like, hey, this has really been a problem, and pretty clearly the defense has been the thing standing between them and a national championship, or at least, a national championship game potentially appearance last year. The defense has been the thing that has been holding them back. So now you've made a change. The change is not going to you're not immediately going to have 17 5-star recruits on defense this year and the entire defense being first team All Big Ten. But I think you're going to see pretty immediate changes in terms of how good the defense is. And, being a top 10 defense, I think that's a realistic possibility, because they were bad last year, but they were, by a lot of the advanced metrics, kind of in the 30-ish range, which feels like a disaster for Ohio State and really is like, well, that's kind of just okay. And it's not good enough to win the national championship, but it's good enough that you can win 11 games and win the Rose Bowl and all that stuff. It's just, the pieces are there. I do think this is going to be a year when you're going to see some pretty immediate results once the season starts. I think the Jim Knowles, Kerry Combs / Matt Barnes transition to Jim Knowles is going to be a pretty noticeable one. And I think, yes or no, I'm just going to name one name. JT Tuimoloau, first team All Big Ten this year. I say yes.
I'm not saying no. Yeah, I fully expect him to be very, very good. For one, he gets a lot of attention. Well, he's going to get more attention. People know his name. Not everybody can say it, but they know it. They know who you're talking about when you say the name, or when they say the name, they know who they're talking about. But yeah, I expect him to have the performance, the attention to be one of the best players in the Big Ten immediately. Because even though I think he had 2 sacks or whatever last year, but he was involved in a lot of stuff and involved against the run and was better than he should have been last year.
And Denzel Burke, I think, is in that same conversation where he's a name that people know now. And I think, if he's healthy and he has a season where he's putting up, Denzel Burke Thorpe Award finalist, like that feels like a thing that we might hear about in 4 months or so. I mean, I think there's enough, and we've talked about in the past about the Jack position / Leo position and the statistical production that you see out of that position. Like, you may get a guy there. Does a Tyleik Williams take that next leap? Like, it feels like you're going to have a lot of guys who are potentially at that level this year. Does one of the safeties, does Josh Proctor have a 6 interception season and then he's the first team All Big Ten safety? Like, it feels like over under 2.5 Buckeyes first team All Big Ten defense this year. Over under.
I'm going over that, and I'm thinking. Remember what Ohio State 2006, was it a season opener against Texas? or was it?
No, I think that was the second game.
But James Laurinaitis essentially comes out of not necessarily nowhere because he started the season, but he made his name nationally in that game, and then that carried him on to an All-American season as a sophomore. You're opening the season against Notre Dame. Everybody's watching. If somebody stands out, people are going to pay attention to them, and then they get known and watched, and people say their name, and people pay attention to what they're doing all season long. And yeah, I could see that happening where it's just some left tackle, some right tackle for Notre Dame has a long day, and whoever's on the other side of them, they get it's just assumed that, okay, well, this is a great person, a great player, that they're all Big Ten. And because sometimes that's how it has to happen, where it happens in the first game, and the writers, the media just ignore what they do the rest of the season, and boom, I saw him that one time and he was great. But then also, when they do stand out that early, like James Laurinaitis did, you continue to watch them make plays because you know their name. And a lot of times it's just being aware of somebody that keeps them at the forefront of these things. And all Big Ten, all of that stuff, it's some of it's popularity, some of it's, put whatever stock you want into it. But like not having any for so long, it's very unusual at Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball. And like you, Tom, I do expect that to change. Anything else before we get out of here?
Over under 0.5 Broyles Award winners for Broyles Award trophies for Jim Knowles this year. Because it feels like all the stuff you just talked about with the defense and the attention and the narrative around the defense, and oh boy, the defense was the only thing that was holding him back, and oh boy, if they're half as good as I think they could be this year, it feels like you might see Jim Knowles Broyles Award winner this year.
Yeah, if Ohio State is, what do they need to be? Do they need to be a top 10 defense? Do they need to be in the finals? Like, I don't know exactly when the Broyles, is that before the playoffs? Like, is this Heisman time, like early December?
It feels like that's part of that awards week thing that they do, after the Heisman or before the whenever it is. I pay a tremendous amount of attention to this, as you can probably tell. But at the thing where they announce all the other nonsense, it feels like that's probably around that time. They probably need to be a top 5 defense to really, because didn't he win it? He won it last year. He won it 2 years ago or something like that, didn't he? Or am I remembering that wrong?
I don't know that offhand. Perhaps, but it's just an honor to be nominated.
He was at least in the in that nominating conversation at Oklahoma State. But yeah, he feels like someone where you have the opportunity. You're gonna be in the spotlight. You're gonna be a person. You're gonna see a lot of Jim Knowles shots on the sideline during telecast. He is going to be on the sideline, by the way. He is not up in the box. They are figuring out if Perry Aliano or Tim Walton will be up in the box, but Jim Knowles said he wanted to be down on the field because he thinks, some of these soft factors of, hey, something's going wrong. He can get people calmed down, all that kind of stuff, and just, be a little bit of a calming presence on the sidelines. He thinks that's very important, so he will not be up in the box. So they've got to find someone else who they can trust to kind of be his eyes and ears up in the box. So that's a little bit, going to get sorted out. But I think you are going to see a lot of Jim Knowles shots on the sideline, and you can kind of see it in your mind already. The Fox Big Noon game, and Fox puts up a graphic with Jim Knowles standing on the sideline, and the graphic says Ohio State giving up 7.2 points per game or whatever it is, and second best in nation, and lots of people are watching Ohio State games, and lots of people are going, oh, the defense is good all of a sudden, and Jim Knowles is there. Oh, okay, and then those people are Broyles Award winners. So that's typically how that works. So yeah, I think that's I don't know that he's the prohibitive favorite or anything, but it feels like you're going to hear his name in that conversation some this fall.
I can picture it now, Tom. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to have, like all of these awards, there'll be 3 finalists for the Broyles, and 2 of them will be from Ohio State. You'll have Jim Knowles, and you'll have Brian Hartline. The problem with that is those 2 are going to cancel each other out, and it's going to be Brian Ferentz slipping in there to steal this award for leading Iowa to 16.3 points per game on offense this year. The miraculous revolution of this Hawkeye offense, and he's going to walk away with it when he doesn't deserve it. he does not deserve it, Tom.
I don't know. I can't remember if this was at the podium, like on TV, where everyone would have seen it, or if it was, later at the table. But Kirk Ferentz at one point got asked, hey, all your assistant coaches got big raises this year, except your son, who didn't get a raise or got the smallest raise or something like that. And the question was essentially, was that because the offense was terrible last year? And then Kirk Ferentz had to answer a question about how his son is not a particularly good offensive coordinator, but you know whose fault that is? It's the guy who hired him. Who is that, Tony? I think it's Kirk Ferentz. That's okay, though, because Kirk Ferentz has a new contract, as you may or may not have heard, which runs through, I think, 2029 or 2030. So he will be the head coach of Iowa, if he coaches that whole thing out, the head coach of Iowa for 30 years. 30 years. His first year was 1998. So, So he's I think he might be a lifer there. That's, I think, what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's a long time, because that's like, 30 years in Iowa. It's like 60 years anywhere else. So it's like you gotta put that in Iowan years, and it's a long time. Tom, anything else?
Well, one other thing with Kirk Ferentz, this was something that I was not there for, but Marcus Hartman, who I mentioned earlier, doing the morning show. I don't think we talked about this on the morning show at any point, but he said he was standing there and someone asked Kirk Ferentz, like, what is it about, why can't the Big Ten West ever seem to win a Big Ten championship game? And Kirk Ferentz just said, Ohio State. That was it. Like, that was his answer. Like, there's a pause and everyone's waiting for him to expound on it. It's like, I'm not kidding. Like, that's the answer. That's the reason. So I thought that was, you get these kind of moments of levity in the middle of these things, and sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. But that was an amusing little moment from there as well.
All right, then. Thank you for that, Tom. I am looking forward to Iowa's offense this year. It should be outstanding. Do you think, how many games, Tom, will Iowa's defense outscore their offense? Because it's not. It's if I go 0.5, what's the over under on that? Like you go over?
Yeah, I'm going over. I'm going to go over 0.5, especially. Are we counting field goals where the defense gives them the ball in field goal range? Does the defense get credit for that if the offense didn't have to move the ball? It feels like it's going to happen at least once or twice this year, because they should have a pretty good defense, and the offense is it's going to be tight end heavy. Let's just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. And a reminder, we are now at BuckeyeHuddle.com, Tom and I. That's where this Buckeye Weekly is coming to you from. Also, as Tom mentioned, he's got the morning show there now as well. There are more podcasts coming. Again, it's a new site. We're still throwing everything down. Me and Tom are there. Alex Gleitman is there. Mark Givler is there. Ross Fulton is there. We got some X's and O's. Justin Whitlatch is there as well. Devin Ratcliffe doing X's and O's. Those three guys that I just mentioned, we've got a corner on the market with those three. Right now, there's an X's and O's thread going on. Ask all the X's and O's questions you have. They can talk it to you like you don't know what you're talking about, and they can also talk it to you like if you do know what you're talking about. So they got master level classes and intro level classes for all of us there. So if that's your thing or you want to get into it, that's a good place to start. So, and again, we've got the recruiting covered. We got the team covered now with camp starting in 1 week, and we are all looking forward to it. So again, hit the bell, subscribe, do all of those things that we appreciate. And we thank you very much, and we will talk to you guys later.